Hi, I was out of time out for some time and I was busy traveling and I did this beautiful interview with Alwyn Cosgrove some time back. So loads of information, lot of nuggets for young trainers. It's a long one. The lighting was very poor in the hotel which I was quarantining and bear with the lighting, but the content is very good. Do not miss it. If you are a trainer, SNC, hear the entire thing. Loads of information. Go for it. In today's timeout, we have the veteran, legend, Alwyn Cosgrove.
Legend.
Been waiting to see you for so many years. Finally, thanks to internet, it's an absolute pleasure in hosting you, Alwyn.
Thank you for having me.
To
I'm not
social
sure
media,
I'm a legend. Legends are dead people.
been hearing about your name and Rachel for so many years. Finally, get to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This part of the world, we would like to know a lot about you. And can you give us a little bio about yourself from Scotland to martial arts to US to results fitness to Rachel and you survived cancer twice. It's a story. Can you start?
Yeah, so I was born in Scotland and I was born in Glasgow and I grew up in a town called Livingston, which is just really between Glasgow and Edinburgh, which is the capital city. It was a rough, Scotland's a kind of where I grew up was a working class neighborhood. It's kind of a rough area. So I don't want to say there's some lovely people there, right? It's very like lovely people, but I you grew up in an area where you needed to know how to like look after yourself. So I got into martial arts when I was young. I was about 11 or 12, started taking taekwondo lessons, and it really changed the direction of my life because while I started to be set for self-defense reasons, it grew into sport for me, and it just became like the purpose of. I had a girl that worked for me from Japan a long time ago, and there's a phrase in Japanese called ikigai, which means your life's purpose. So for a while, it was my life's purpose to be a competitive fighter, and I was competing in taekwondo. And in that process, I got into understanding that. Let me do something simple like boxing. There's really only four punches in boxing: a jab, a straight, a hook, and an uppercut. And it's some sort of like tweaks on that, but they're all variations on those four. I can show you those four right now, right? But you're not ready to fight Floyd Mayweather, right? So it wasn't necessarily learning more technical things, more technique. It was never that. It was this application of the same techniques. And that led me into studying exercise science and sports science. There's weight classes in Taekwondo. There's weight classes in all martial arts, right? And why is that? Well, that's because a stronger person has an advantage. So if we keep that in mind, the assumption is a bigger person is stronger. And it's largely true. A bigger person usually is, but not always. So then I reasoned that were I to learn strength and become stronger, I would have an advantage in sport. And that led me to study sports science, and it led me to college. And at the end of summers in college, I would take a summer job and I would teach taekwondo. I would do some things. And in 1 year, I took a job to work in the US teaching at a summer camp. There's an organization that organized work visas, organized jobs for you. So I taught a summer camp for kids and taught taekwondo and weight training with my two jobs. And I did that every year. And so when I finished all my college, I said, I'll do this one more year and then I'll get a real job. And when I applied that year, I don't know if the rules had changed or because I'd been a bunch of times, I got an extended visa. Like it was longer than the normal 6 months. I got a multiple year one. Maybe it was a mistake. I don't know, right? But so at the end of the summer teaching taekwondo, I got a job at a hotel in the area. There's a movie called Dirty Dancing, an old movie, and it's set in the hotel where I worked in this upstate area in New York. So I worked there, and then one day a boxer arrived, Alex Stewart, who was training for a fight, and he was training up there because there's no distractions. It's a very quiet place, and it was kind of the end of the holiday season. I got a job as his conditioning coach. So my First job in the US was training a professional boxer, apart from teaching Taekwondo. Then I picked up the New York Times one day, and there was an article about gyms in New York City. And so I said, well, I'm going to apply to work at this gym, and then I'll move back to Scotland at Christmas. This was about September, October. And I'd been in the US since July. I gotta just go home at Christmas. Ended up staying at that gym for a little bit longer. And then fast forward, I met my wife, Rachel, in New York. She's from California, and we ended up moving out here. And I've been in California now. I've been in the United States longer than I ever lived in Scotland, which is it's kind of a weird feeling. But I've been in California longer than I've lived anywhere, right? Like, because in
California, from the
Scotland, New York, California. So I've been in now California. I've been in the US longer than I lived in the UK, and the longest I've lived anywhere has been California.
Hot and cold, you've seen both.
So, you know, like, our joke is that me and Rachel met halfway. We met halfway in New York. Scotland and in California, halfway it's like a 6-hour flight to New York from both places.
My God, what a story this is. And when was your first job with a sort of a proper gym? When did you start enrolling yourself in a proper gym, or when did you get a job in a proper gym?
So I worked in gyms back in, I went to college in England, actually. So I worked in gyms then. The industry hadn't really evolved yet. You were really more like you showed people the equipment, but you were kind of more like a janitor, really. Like, you're cleaning up more and putting weights away. You weren't doing a lot of coaching. So I'd been in the gym for a long time, but then in college, I worked in a gym. And when I got, after working with Alex Stewart, the boxer in New York, I got a job at a place, the US Athletic Training Center, which is in Madison Avenue in New York City. So that was the first time I only worked in a gym. So I started teaching Taekwondo in '86, and my first job teaching fitness was probably '89, '90. And it was '94, '95, I went full-time in the gym. And then we moved to California in '99, and I worked at a local gym for a little while, and then we opened Results Fitness in 2000. It will be 21 years next month, end of this month, actually, end of April.
Put in the hard miles for so many years. And that time when you went to the US for the first time, I mean, you felt that the US was a lot more advanced in strength and conditioning, fitness, and sports training, or was UK on par with the US?
In some areas, it was vastly ahead. In terms of professionalism, it was definitely far ahead. Like, I don't think there existed like a personal training job in the UK at the time. I can tell you, I worked for 4 or 5 years, and then I was toying with the idea of moving back to the UK. You know, maybe around prior to the Sydney Olympics in 2000, I was talking about moving back, and I'd applied to work with a couple of soccer teams and some things like that. And I wasn't only just getting like turned down. When I was seeing like strength and conditioning and fitness coach, these teams didn't have that role. Now they have departments. Like Manchester United as a team of people. And one of my good friends from Taekwondo and from college, Nick Grantham, who's an excellent strength and conditioning coach with a ton of experience. His first ever job in the field was for the national gymnastics team of Great Britain. That was his first ever job because the field was so young there, right? So professionally, I think the US was far ahead, probably a lot in terms of strength training and exercise physiology and endurance sports. I mean, at the time we had the Linford Christie and the Colin Jacksons of the world dominating, sprint athletics. So I think in terms of like speed, for a while, Europe was a little bit ahead. In terms of conditioning, it was ahead. And then it was hard too, Bas, because getting information was tougher then. Now it's global. Like, I'm talking to somebody in India right now. Like, it's not like this was unheard of 10, 15 years ago, right? In real time. So so I think that it's now, I don't see any country having an advantage anymore because of the global sharing of information. But at the time, it was definitely the United States were ahead professionally, 100%, right?
The world is in your window now, but back in the 80s, when you first moved to the US, who were the most inspirational figures for you, like the best strength and conditioning coaches or the fitness trainers? Who were
It was, I
those?
mean, it was a while, right? Because it was the late 90s, I think. Like I was studying the guy I worked with, Gary Guerrero. He was a strength coach for the New York Rangers ice hockey team, and he's a physical therapist. He was one of the first guys to really show me a lot of stuff. And then I just was reading books, and then the first one that I can remember, I remember to see Fred Hatfield, who was running the International Sports Science Association, just getting this real understanding of how strong was. Right, because like I have this. I learned this thing from Dave Tate from Elite Fitness that one of the and not all of them because it's changing now, but sometimes a young female coach, the strongest guy she's ever met is her dad or her boyfriend, and she's got a false idea of how strong really strong is, right? So the first was Fred Hatfield, and then it was honestly through a magazine at the time called Muscle Media 2000. Charles Poliquin had a column in there. So he was first. And then as we talked before we started the call, it was Paul Chek was then the next guy. And then through the whole time, the National Strength and Conditioning Association over here, the NSCA, they always had conferences. And then I kind of went that away from the bodybuilding kind of world. And it was guys like Paul and Juan Carlos Santana and Michael Boyle, and there's some great powerlifting guys out there, Louis Simmons and Dave Tate, Jim Wendler, and all those guys that I learned from. Also, I just seem to gravitate towards these guys. And I would say that sort of that world of where it's the Mike Boyle, the Great Cook, the Carlos Santana, that really influenced me then. And then as my career grew, it was you started understanding more things like Josh Henkin with the DVRT system has just changed everything that we do. The TRX with Randy Hetrick and Chris Frankel and the team over there with their education really revolutionized some the stuff we're doing. And of course Pavel and Brett Jones and the kettlebell stuff. So it's just, but I definitely was I went that path. So I think that the greatest strength coach of all time is Al Vermeil, who Paul and Charles learned from, right? Paul Chek and Charles learned from, and Mike Boyle learned from. And I've been fortunate to it's amazing to me that when I walk into a conference, if Al is teaching, he knows who I am. He always says hello and comes up. And I think he's the greatest of all time in terms of what we do, right? I'm sure there's an Olympic lifting coach who's superior or a powerlifting coach, but to me, Al Vermeil is the number one. So I was like I hate the phrase, right? But as a functional guy, right? Like that's the world I kind of went down into.
Any experience of meeting Charlie Francis or Donald or
Joe?
Dave?
So that's funny you should say that. I was fortunate enough, and I started writing for T Nation magazine in 2004-ish, and as a result of that, I was able to get in contact with the late Charlie Francis, who's the greatest speed coach of all time, right? And I brought Charlie in for a 2-day seminar at Results Fitness. And I do not know what I was doing. We had a tiny little gym, and Charlie was so expensive. And I was like, right, I lost money on it. He got all the money and extra, but I was just, I picked him up on a Friday afternoon, and we dropped him off on a Monday, and I just asked him questions. I mean, he was getting fed up with me by the end. Just asked him questions. Yeah. In terms of even now, like I probably have his book nearby. It's two main books. The Charlie Francis training system, which got retitled Training for Speed, but Speed Trap, which is his story. There's training information in there that's very good. But he, I would say now, and he passed away sadly quite a long time ago. Even now, when you look at the training method he was doing with Ben Johnson and the Canadian team in the late 80s, you're thinking about, that's 30 plus years ago, and it's still like
gold standard.
Yeah, it's like I'm sure he'd be doing different things now,
sure.
But I'm still looking at that and I'm like, man, I haven't figured out speed training the way this man had it figured out 35 years ago, right? Like I was like
many conferences, like 30 years, 40 years later, still there has never been a piece like what Charlie Francis has written. It's just ahead of his times. It was, I mean, even though he was tainted with all those drug things, but
here's my thing with that, right? And I've said this with Lance Armstrong. Lance Armstrong has been stripped of all his Tour de France titles, but we can't find someone in the top 25 who didn't test positive. We can't find a guy who's drug free. So regardless of the drug scandal, there's a documentary from ESPN called 979. Have you seen that?
No, not yet.
So if you look that up, it's called ESPN. It's a US sports channel called 30 for 30, and I believe it's 979. Is it 9? It might be 978. Whatever the time Ben Johnson ran in that race, that's the title of it. And they go through the whole 8 guys in the final, and none of them have not tested positive. Every one of them has had a positive test. So I asked Charlie this. He said something about drugs to me when he was here, and for anybody listening, like this is me paraphrasing it. I may be getting this wrong. He said something about it's a widespread use, and the coaches kind of actually exchange training ideas and drug cycle ideas. It's not like a secret thing. And I said, so all is not what it seems. And he says, no, it's exactly as it seems. It's just not as fast as you think. The number 1 guy would still be number 1. He goes, the number 2 guy would still be number 2, because the training and the other stuff is the difference. They don't have, it's just would be slower. And that stuck in my head is that, like the Tour de France, Lance Armstrong would still have won. It just would have been slower, right? So Charlie Francis, when you're looking at 30 plus years ago, and now it's still like young coaches, if you haven't read that book, don't be thinking this is a 30-year-old book. I'm not going to get anything from it. Oh, yes, you are. I will guarantee you don't even understand some of it.
I always espouse this line everywhere. I mean, if you're a sprints coach, you'll be adept in plyometrics, you'll be adept in lifting, you'll be adept in conditioning and speed and whatnot. And Charlie Francis, truly like country miles ahead of the others.
I was training one of my athletes the other day, and we were indoors, and the thing we're doing right now is I do a 4 exercise sequence, which the movement pattern is the same, but the speed changes, right? So it's complicated, but the first one is an overcoming isometric, then it's a heavy lift, then explosive, and then I move her into bounding and then sprint. It's like, I see it as, she sees it as 4 exercises. I see it as 1 set where the speed changes, right? But with the bounding, it was like, and I was like, oh, and I was like, I could tell it was heavy, right? And I was like, Charlie Francis was hearing foot strikes on a track and could predict his athlete's time based on how heavy their foot was landing, right? Think about that I'm only starting to understand it in 2021.
Imagine back in the days, Yuri Verkhoshansky was doing the same thing, conjugate training methods. Back in a lab, we accidentally.
Have you ever read Hank Kreijenhoff?
Yeah, I mean all this.
Yeah, he's my new he's my new hero. I'm a fanboy of him currently.
Thinking About Speed is another book is written recently. I mean, I think we published now. Means
what we need is speed. I think I think it's a different title from the first publication, but it's a fantastic book. That's my and I've got some stuff on peaking from William Freeman from US Track and Field. That's an older stuff. So, man, there's gold in the I don't want to tell people to just go back and read like sports history, because we know more stuff now. But I like studying guys like Hank. He's read everything Charlie ever did. So if I read his stuff, I'm getting like a cheat code because he's already read it too, right? I don't have to, like, I have this joke of exponential education, where if I'm studying someone who's studying, it's like I'm cheating because I'm getting double study, right?
Integrated learning.
Yeah, that's it. Like Mike Boyle reads so much. Like you almost don't have to read if you read Mike Boyle.
I just did a podcast with Mike Boyle. I mean, 20 years later, I mean, I've seen all his books, I've read all his books, and he has collected information like nobody's business. Yeah, unbelievable. These guys are pioneers in the business, and there was a time when no internet, no access to
This
information.
is my first year on the Perform Better tour, presenting alongside Mike. He did a seminar of 25 years, 25 mistakes. It was his 25th year, right? And that was full time. That was me last year. That's how far behind I am of Mike. But now, I'm not saying Mike is old. I'm like, in my rookie year as a presenter, Mike was talking about his 25th anniversary as a full-time coach.
I'm going to put you on a spot for a few questions now.
Or anything you want, man.
What do you think about hip thrust, the exercise, hip thrust and Brett?
I've met Brett a couple of times. I remember him coming up and giving me he had a glute ebook, and it was like, he goes, I printed it out and I'd love to give it to you. I was like, oh, thank you very much. And he hands me this brick, right, of stuff, and I'm like, can you just summarize this for me? Because I'll be honest. I'll use this as a reference game, but I'm not reading a 400-page manual on the bot. So I think for the gluteal hypertrophy, I think it seems to be super effective, and I think the idea of the vectors that Brett, I'll be fair, it's kind of pioneered for that, is something that no one else is doing. I other than early stage work with people, I don't use a lot of it though. Like I'm not like, and I mean it, and I mean this completely respectfully to Brett. Paul Chek taught me that a decade before, right? He had it with shoulders on the stability ball though, and we just called it a tabletop. We called it a tabletop, and then we went to supine lateral ball roll while holding the bridge, and then we would do single leg. So I was using these hip thrusts or glute bridges. I never use a lot of weight. I like getting people on their feet as much as I can, but it's the Bruce Lee line, right? Like, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is specifically your own. There's something to it. But I'll confess, I don't use a lot of it. I guess I'm a functional guy, right? I want people standing.
So you're a guy who says the wars are fought while standing or running.
Yeah. And I've seen some stuff that, and I'm going to quote the research now, and I'll confess I haven't picked holes in it or analyzed it. There was some evidence came out recently that maybe a full squat, if you could do it, actually activated the glutes just as much. That there was some stuff there that, to be fair, I think Brett took that on and has adapted. So yeah, it's. So that my summary is, it's there. It's an exercise. It's always hard because it's just a small piece. Like it's one like exercise, right? And I think Brett, perhaps unfairly, is people think that's all he does. He does other exercises too, you know. So
that's another one. I mean, what about squats and deadlifts for athletes? I mean, let's say you're a basketball player. So
yeah. So I'm on a. Like we talked about Mike, we still do squats and deadlifts. I don't do a lot of back squats with people. We do a lot of trap bar deadlifts. Trap bar deadlifts, to me, there's something about it where you can get really strong training, not very heavy, and you can really de-emphasize the eccentric with it quite safely. So I can get athletes really strong without a lot of soreness, right? So I will always do a block of that. Like we'll do a block with the high handles, the low handles, and then low handles standing on a small platform for extreme range. Then we have a trap bar, which has got the back is open. So we can do like staggered stance work. Then I move to single leg, and then I go to pure single leg with it. So you're completely standing on one leg. and then we move the position of the single leg stuff. So I still use bilateral training. I use a lot more single leg training than we used to do, but we still, I think there's just there are bad exercises. I don't want to say there are no bad exercises. There's some exercises you shouldn't use, but we still use front squats, goblet squats, double kettlebell front squats a lot. I use trap bar deadlifts, and we also have a strong powerlifting community. They need to squat and deadlift, and we have kids that go away to college to collegiate programs where they're going to be tested on the squat. They're going to be tested on the clean, and I'm obligated to prepare my athletes for that. Like, I can't send them unprepared, but it's if you were to come to results and just watch, you'll see a lot of trap bar deadlifts, some deadlifts, some squats, very little barbell squats, a lot of single leg work, a lot of lunges, a lot of single leg RDLs. So it's I think Mike does none at all. I think he does no bilateral work at all right now. I'm not, maybe some trap bar stuff, but we're still doing some.
Are we twins or something?
Maybe.
I mean, Eric Cressy talks a lot about deadlifts and pull from rack and stuff like that. He has a different.
Yeah, I think that there's I also see my own bias coming in, right? Because none of our athletes, we've got people who are great at deadlifting. Nobody's great at squatting or benching, because I'm not great at squatting or benching. And I wonder if that plays a part. And I actually talked to Eric about this, and I goes, do you think that there's some subconscious bias because of the lifts I'm not good at? But he said, no, the deadlift's just a great exercise. And you recognize that, right? So it could be that.
One man's food is another man's poison. Okay.
Yeah. But we do a lot of, I'm still, I'm a huge fan of single leg training. I don't think it's defined completely, because a lot of people are doing it as staggered stance training. A split squat is not single leg training to me, right? A step up is not single leg training. The other leg helps. Only a pure unsupported other leg is single leg training. Not a lot of people can do that, right? So I have places for all the other things. So yeah, it's I think it's like being I've always used the phrase a doctor, and they're like, do you ever use this drug? I'm like, well, yeah, I do. Like sometimes, right? Like, or a chef. Do you ever use like, chili oil? I'm like, yeah, sometimes. Do you ever like, it's not like I only use certain things.
Depends on the dish.
Yeah, like it's the exercise selection is a solution to a problem or a question. So start with I think that the DBRT system, where they use sandbag training, is one of the most effective systems in the world. However, if you were going to enter a powerlifting competition, you better spend some time on a bench press with a bar. You have to. So if the question is, how do you get ready for a bench press competition, and your answer doesn't involve the bench press, I think you're wrong, right? But that doesn't mean the bench press is the right answer for how do you get better at a 5K race, right? So it's like, what do you think of this exercise? It's kind of like if that's the answer to the question, I think it's a great choice. But if you ask me a different question, like I don't get, like I'll give you a different answer, right? I think running, if you're going to run distance, you have to run distance. But if you're running distance because you want to get fat loss, it's a dumb choice, right? Like, it doesn't mean running's dumb, right? Oh, look at you, right? Old school.
What's your take on flywheel? The K-box, the flywheel. What's your take on flywheel, K-box? Do you use it?
So I've never really. I've looked at the research.
It's promoted by Simply Faster and Mark Westage.
Yeah, that's the. So I don't have one, so I'm hesitant to comment. But let me just add, I could get one if I wanted, and I've chosen not to. Right. So I see it. I see some application. I think also, though, in my commercial facility, I can't get one of anything.
Exactly.
I need to get 4, right? Like that's the thing. So I'm interested in all this stuff. There's a question I got, I think it's from Lane Norton, who was like, show me the evidence, but compared to what? And what is the trade-off? Because everything has a trade-off. So does this exercise or piece of equipment work? Compared to, is it better than kettlebell swings or deadlifts or using bands to create that overspeed eccentric, right? Is it, and what is the trade-off? Because everything has a trade-off. Even if it's just taking away training time, you could be doing something else. So that's kind of my filter for everything. And some things make it and some things don't really make it, right? And it's like, I didn't want the TRX to be good. I didn't want kettlebells to be good. I don't want to rewrite all my programs and buy a whole bunch of things. I didn't want to. But now you have to. When we first wrote that first book, New Rules of Lifting, we weren't allowed to put in the TRX or kettlebells by the publisher because not enough gyms had them. But by the 4th book, they were commonplace, right?
What's your take on omega-3 capsules, especially when you talk about EPA and DHA? Charles Poliquin used to write so much about it, and he said Asians need to take 5 grams of EPA and DHA. And still, I mean, there's enough research on omega-3. What's your take?
So I think, first of all, I'll just tell everybody, I'm not a doctor. I'm not an epidemiologist. But if you look any medical research and you put in fish oil or omega-3 in any condition, there's research nearly on it, and it nearly always shows there's beneficial effects from when you get from deficient to a good level. Do I think you need capsules? I doubt it. I think you could do it if you eat fish regularly, and that describes no one I know, right? So every one of my clients take fish oil. I use a liquid. I do a tablespoon a day. I do, which is probably about 10 grams of capsules. I think
you consume.
I'm speaking. Go on.
You consume 10 grams.
10 grams of total fish oil, one tablespoon. So I could pull it. I could grab the bottle out. I can't tell you exactly how much EPA DHA is in that, but it's a high dose. The only negative I've seen is it really thins the blood, right? So if you were going to have surgery or something, you could have an issue with it. I've just had no negative effects. My oncologist actually suggested, I was already taking it, but it was one of his recommendations to take it. All my fat loss clients, I recommend they take one. Like I like them to take a supplement.
Game, set, and match omega-3.
I can't think of. I usually think of this as 3 things, right? And I got this from Joey Antonio from the International Sports Sciences, International Sports SSN, Sports Nutrition Science, International Society of Sports Nutrition. I knew I'd get it eventually. ISSN, and he said, right, there's 3 categories. Definitely helps, definitely hurts. Well, we know fish oil doesn't ever definitely hurt. Definitely helps, won't hurt, might help. It's in one of these 2 categories. So I can't see any reason to tell you not to take it.
Absolutely.
Like now, the questions that people have are the capsules, could the capsules be rancid? Could the capsules not be stored properly? I'm like, absolutely, but I can say that about anything. Chicken, right? Protein powder. Like if anything's bad, you shouldn't take it. So, but let's just assume it's all good. I can't think of a situation where it would be detrimental, right? So it gets, in terms of supplements, it's I don't use a lot, but that's one I use every day.
When you say supplements, what are the go-to supplements for you, or do you use supplements? Whey protein,
Yeah.
vitamin, BCAA.
So I do. I'm going to start with the easy one. Is I use a protein powder. I don't think of that as a supplement. I think of it as food, just in a different form.
Daily
right? I eat eggs, chicken, beef. I eat different proteins, and I have a couple of protein drinks that there's a powder that I use. In terms of my supplements, I've been testing something called True Niagen. Have you heard of that?
No.
It is, I'll tell you the exact, I'll just Google it right now. It is a nicotine amide riboside, NAD. It's the brand name for that. So I've been taking a capsule of that for about a year. I don't think it's a supplement you feel. I think it's maybe more of a health supplement. So I haven't felt anything, but the science seems pretty strong, right? And it's a B3 derivative. I take a multivitamin every day. I take my fish oil. So when I do my shake, I have my protein shake and I put creatine in it. I did my thesis on creatine in 1992. Other than the slight weight gain, I'd see no downside to creatine. It's another one in the fish oil world that I think is useful. So I do a protein shake with a teaspoon of creatine. I have my multivitamin. I have 5,000 IUs of vitamin D with that, and my fish oil. That's my little nutrient pack.
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of research on creatine, and in examine.com, they say that even with people with kidney failure, I mean, creatine ingestion is not going to actually affect them. I mean, what's your take?
Yeah, and I think it's if we looked at, I mean, if you're in kidney failure, I think we have other concerns than you taking creatine, right? So, but I haven't, again, it's, there's a lot of evidence that it helps a lot of things. I haven't really seen any evidence that we shouldn't be taking it. So not too many supplements. The only other thing I would say is for most people, I call it the 3 C's: caffeine, creatine, and carbohydrates can be very useful, right? You take a carbohydrate drink, it could be pretty useful.
Core stability. I think the world went through a sort of a roller coaster with core stability, and everybody started talking about core stability as a finisher, as a primary exercise, and everything was revolving around activating your TV. And all of us were going through that right for some time. And how have you settled down?
So let's, we have to define what that means, first of all. Like, stability is the standing on an unbalanced ball and not wobbling is not stability, right? Like, so it's like the remember the totem pole that Paul had, right? The vestibular system, like everything is. So I think that if we establish stability as everything firing at the right time in the right amount to prevent unwanted movement, is what we're trying to do, right? So if you look at Stuart McGill stuff, if you look at a skeleton, first of all, you have a rib cage, then you have a whole bunch of organs under that, and you have a stomach, you have everything here, and then you have one spine right there with nothing else to support it other than muscle system. If that muscle system is not strong, the spine is at risk. And I do a test or a demonstration at a seminar where I have somebody put their arm out to the side like a lateral raise, plant their feet, and I push on their arm, and they're strong. And then I have them lift one foot and put it on a weight plate. So now the hips are off, the spine is off, and I have them push on the arm, and they got weak. And I'm like, now, did your shoulder get weak? Of course not. Of course not. But what happened is the hips are off, the spine is off, and I press here, the body perceives a threat to the spine. So it shuts down the prime mover to protect the spine because your core is in an adverse environment. Your core is unable to stabilize the spine. It perceives a risk, so it shuts it down. So with that in mind, let's work on core stability. However, that doesn't mean wobbling. Yeah. Right? It doesn't mean wobbling. I use the phrase that the purpose of the core, and I got this from Stuart McGill, is to stabilize the spine while other things are happening. And I use the phrase while the extremities are moving and producing or receiving force. I'm punching, right? I'm running, I'm catching a ball, I'm reaching, right? That this is all working. So we train core directly at Results Fitness. Like, we don't, people like, oh, you get all the core activation you want out of squats and deadlifts. I disagree. And I also think that the prime mover could shut down when the core is not strong enough. So we train core directly, and we train it first because exercise order is a variable that's overlooked. We learned at the very beginning, we do big muscles and then small muscles. Remember getting taught that? That makes sense. But what if the small muscle is the thing you want to improve the most? whatever you train first improves the fastest. So exercise order is a real variable that we could be using. And core for so long was done at the end of the workout. So we started doing it earlier, and I think it's, again, most of the time, we do it at the beginning. And I think Mike Boyle's one of my mentors. He does it every third exercise through the workout. He does upper, lower, core, upper, lower, core. I go core, 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 and then upper, lower, right? So core stability, 100%, it needs to be trained directly. We break it into 3 categories. 1, stabilization, planks, side planks, bird dogs. Can you hold? 2, what I call dynamic stabilization, which is a kind of a strange name, where you hold the plank and reach, or pull, or push, or you hold the side plank and roll. So I'm bringing in another force, and then eventually I want you up. I want you off the floor, and I want you up. Farmers carries, offset carries, things like that. I put them in as a core exercise. So, and then I'll do things. I've got one girl right now, she's training for obstacle course racing, but we'll be in a plank and she's got to catch something. So she's got to get out of stability, produce force, receive force, and get back to stability. So I'm training the firing sequence, right? I'm training the speed. So core stability, double thumbs up.
Let's go. I mean, I'm going to ask you a very interesting question. Isometrics. One end of the spectrum, you have heavy isometrics. Let's say a 5-second hold, or 4-second hold. Let's say you're on Smith's machine and do a half squat hold. Another end of the spectrum, you have the Sorensen hold, split squat hold, where you do it for 60 seconds, 70 seconds. Can you clearly give us a distinction about both these type of exercises, and where do you use it, and what do you feel is the efficacy of all these exercises?
So I think let's assume that we've got a healthy population, because there are some applications for isometrics to overcome an injury, right? I think other than entry-level core work, I found that just holding has very little transfer to anything. Just holding. I can pull in an isometric within a rep. So I could lower, hold, and then press, and I get all the benefits of everything, right? So just the isometric itself, just holding passively, I found very little transfer, very little benefit when compared to other training methods. However, I do use what I call overcoming isometrics, where, for example, in a deadlift, you're grabbing the bar and you're pulling it into the rack. You're pulling it hard and trying. You're not moving because the weight is so heavy and the weight is fixed, but you're trying to produce more force. Like, I mean, I guess kind of like the flywheel, if I put it on max, right? You're trying to produce more force, not just hold. So what happens is it's an isometric movement because there's no change in length, there's no movement, but the force is trying to go up and up and up, right? I use those quite a bit. I can get people quite strong with that, but the idea of just holding, I haven't seen a lot of transfer. If you look at the triphasic training system that Cal Dietz wrote, they have an eccentric phase, an isometric phase, and a regular phase, but within that, it's a hold within a movement. I see a place for that, right? I see a place, like, I think we overreacted in the early days of tempo with counting everything, but I think we've underreacted now where no one's counting anything. If you go down with a pause and then left, it's a very different effect than a plyo, right? So I think it is a variable. So I don't use really any holds on their own outside of a full repetition, but I will emphasize the isometric sometimes. But I'm a huge fan of what we call overcoming isometrics, I think is the phrase. I hope I'm using the right phrase. It's what I would do is you would do a bench press into the rack, the safety pins of the rack, where you cannot, unless you can bench 1,000 pounds, you're not moving this rack, but you're pushing as hard as you can, right? And then you'll release. I feel like that has a transfer. I feel like holding and just trying to hold the position, I don't think does. And I've seen some stuff on what we call yielding isometrics. They just become eccentrics. that I see. It starts to, like, you're trying to do an isometric hold at the top of a pull-up and you start to come down. I feel like it's an eccentric at that point, right? So it's again, it's you're asking some good questions, and I hate giving you this answer, but yeah, it depends. I don't use any of just holding for the sake of it. I'll use overcoming and trying to produce more force, but I will emphasize it in a movement. I feel like tempo has 4 buckets, right? Slow down, pause, slow up. That's rehab only. Slow down, pause, up fast. That's a good training exercise. Slow down, up fast, no pause. That's my normal training. And fast up and down is plyos. So that's the continuum. I don't need anything else. But this end of explosiveness doesn't get used by a lot of people. And this end of slow both ways doesn't get used unless I'm in a rehab situation. Producing force slowly, I don't see a lot of application, but I do use that. And I'm using it when I was talking about that 4 sequence of speed. Overcoming isometrics is the first sequence. Like that's the first part. So I use it, not very much, and it appears in none of my books because for general fitness, I don't use it at all.
Back in the days, Polikin started the 4 numbers tempo. So he's eccentric, then a pause, then a concentric, then a pause. So
yeah, and I think that if you just think of those distinct phases and play with it, I found when I was counting, I was so focused on counting that the weight was terrible, right? But I just think it's under control, pause, up fast most of the time. And I felt like if you pause where it's hard, you don't pause where it's easy. And like I've seen guys pausing at both. One makes it harder and then there's a reset between reps. I'm like, I feel like I don't really like reset between reps. I think people do naturally during a set of heavy exercises. They'll take a rest. I don't need to program that. That'll happen, right? So, but I think that overcoming isometrics is something that not a lot of people are using.
And what about breathing? I mean, while doing exercise, I mean, what is
so? I'm old school. I mean, we went into the PRI stuff with using breathing resets that I found some value to. I try to coach exhale on effort, EOE, exhale on effort. So they inhale between reps. But with something like that isometric one, you're gonna hold your breath. You're probably gonna like that, right? But I try to I try to coach where like as you push, you exhale. That's what I try to coach. But I feel like it's again, like people probably do it naturally. When it's heavy and you stay tight, you know.
There was a time when people used to overemphasize on breathing, then they forgot about it. Then again, it came back. Then they underwent completely now. I mean, I totally agree with you. When you're doing heavy weights, I think the natural way is the best way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you just, again, we call it, if you look at an exercise and you're a coach, there's always something to fix. How many times has it been breath is the biggest thing to fix? Very few, right? And that's where we're at, is that I can find eight things. I can always find 8 things. We put out the biggest fire first. What's the one thing I can fix? And sometimes we're using breath to stay tight, right? And keep good form. That's good, but let's make sure we can cue that in the first place, right?
Very well said. Very well said. What is your story about your fitness center? You and Rachel started this business, and I read your story. I mean, you saw one of your students coming in a Ford or something, and then you said, I need to do my business better. We would like to hear that story.
Yeah, so basically we had we'd opened, and the reason we opened was I had become frustrated at the gym I was working at. There was other trainers there who weren't doing a good job. Good people, like just they didn't care about being good trainers. Like they were trying their best, but they didn't care about getting better. And I just was becoming frustrated, and I couldn't do what I wanted. And I'm sharing equipment with a bunch of people. And I said, you can eliminate all your frustrations if you had your own place. And let me add, I got a whole bunch of new frustrations at that point, right? But we were sharing a used car that my in-laws had bought me as a present. We were sharing it, Rachel and I, right? And one of our staff, our first staff member, came in and had bought a brand new car, Ford Explorer, I think, which is a beautiful SUV car, and came in excited to show us it and to thank us for her being able to afford it. Like she was very grateful. And then we were just looking at each other like, all right, we got to start studying business. Like if I'm taking all the risk is on me. Like I have to pay the bills. If someone gets injured, I'm the problem. If someone gets beat, it's my reputation. How come I'm the least like compensated guy here? So at that point, we started to I said at the time I was probably a black belt in fitness training. Like I was an expert and I was a beginner in business, right? You can't run a business. Like I tell people all the time, did you ever have a coach when you were playing sports? Did you ever have a coach where you were playing cricket? Did you ever have a coach where you're playing soccer? Yeah, of course you did. And now you turn professional in business, and that's the only thing you were ever a professional at. And now you don't have a coach. Now you don't. Now you try to do it by yourself. That makes no sense. So at that point, I started hiring business coaches and attending different seminars and learning, like bringing up my weak links. Like same as if you're stalling, if you fail in a squat and you hinge forward, I can tell what muscles are weak, right? Like I've got one athlete actually, she's very strong. If she fails in a front squat, she just stays at the bottom. It's beautiful. Everything fails. Like it just doesn't lose form at all. My training partner, he does jujitsu on himself to stand up, right? He's all twisted, but we can tell what the weak link is. Well, the weak link for me was business skills and marketing and numbers. So I had to go back to learn that stuff, and learning that made me a better coach because I could help more people, right? Because I could learn how to deliver this stuff better, right? And reach more people. So, and that became kind of what I was known for quite a while, is like a business consultant for gym owners, right?
You've done well there because you've reached all the way to India.
Oh, like I told you earlier, like I was in Russia and people knew me, and people in India know me. It's pretty cool.
Now the most important question. You're a 2-time cancer survivor. That story is unbelievably inspiring for a lot of people. And you're in this fitness business. Please start.
So it was around 2004. I started to just feel like not right. Like I had anxiety, right? And I wasn't sleeping good, and just was feeling uneasy. And no matter what I was doing, I was kind of like tired all the time, and I was gaining weight because I was so tired. I just wasn't moving, right? So after a while, I went to the doctor, and he ran a whole bunch of hormone checks. Everything came back wacky. Thyroid was off, like testosterone was low, cholesterol was off, just everything. Nothing was in normal range, nothing. So you have to think that it's all of these things are causing a problem, but what is causing all of these things, right? Like everything was off. So he's like, all right, let me try this. And he tried with I think it was an anti-anxiety medicine, first of all. And I tried that for a couple of weeks, and my liver enzymes went up because of it. So I stopped that. When I was in for that follow-up, I said, I also found this like lump in my thigh. And I thought it was a muscle tear. I was trying to foam roll it out, And he said, oh, well, let's have a look at it. And we went in. We thought it was a lipoma, which is a fatty deposit. And I went in to have it removed. And the doctor there said, this is big. I'm not sure. I think I want to do this having you under anesthesia. And so a week later, I went in to have it removed, and it was not a lipoma. It was a lymphoma. It was a tumor. So, and it was a lymphoma is a blood cancer. So I was in late stage. There's 4 stages for cancer. I mean, I guess there's 5 stages because the 5th one is you dead, right? So there's 4 before that, right? I was in stage 4, but it's less scary for a blood cancer because of how it is. If you had breast cancer, stage 4 means it's spread. For blood cancer, it means it's spread, but not as scary. I had chemotherapy for 6 months, went into remission, never felt any better, just kept feeling bad, and went for a checkup that the following February. So it was about 6 months after I'd finished treatment, and I was back in stage 4. So I had to have a stem cell transplant. I had to go to a UCLA, which is out here in Los Angeles, California, University of California, Los Angeles. And I had extensive chemotherapy, and then I had a stem cell transplant in 2006. And the day I checked into the hospital was 666, the devil's number, right? It's not very exciting. And then my transplant was on the 13th, another unlucky number. But that was my treatment. So I have been at one point in my career top level national team, national champion taekwondo competitor, and I have been the weakest, sickest person I've ever met. So I have a unique perspective. I can see both sides of that story at once. But yeah, that was a rough few years, my friend. Rough few years.
It was in 2004.
2004, I was first diagnosed. So I did a bunch of treatment, and then my transplant was 2006.
My God, this is, I mean, now you've been training after that for 12 years, 13 years, you're back to normal. A question to just lighten up the thing. What is your 1RM in bench press, squats, and deadlifts in the last 2 years?
I don't know. My deadlift probably 400. Bench press I don't do. Squat 3. Like I never pursued it anymore. I stopped caring. But 303 plates and 4 plates for squat and deadlift. I got right now. I'm trying to do the 32 kilo kettlebell double press, clean and press for 5 reps, and it's driving me nuts because I can do it with dumbbells and I can do it with the bar, but I can't do it with the kettlebell yet. So my current goal is that to get strong. My best 5K time is 21 minutes, I think. So that's my conditioning. My conditioning test is a 5K. So and pull-ups, probably 1 rep right now. Maybe 2 reps is 55 extra pounds. I'm 205, so 25% of body weight. I've got a girl though that trains with me. She weighs 120, and she could do a pull-up with 85 pounds.
Mamma mia.
So I'm not as strong as a little girl at my gym.
There's no age. Age is just a number, and the message from Alwyn is start lifting.
I think if you think of like any sport in the world, I use martial arts as an example. We don't let the teenage girls fight the heavyweight men because of strength. If you look at 5K racing or 10K or marathons, males beat females because of strength. Strength training is a cheat code for life, right? Like it is when you look at someone. We used to think that as someone aged, they got the cardiovascular health was the most important thing, and it is. But as we understood more, their actual function, like their biggest problem is not their ability to take in oxygen, right? Their ability problem is to function in life, and that's a function of muscle and strength. And the only reason that the heart beats faster is because the muscles are asking it for oxygen. Send me oxygen because I'm working. Send me blood, I'm working. So the muscles drive the cardio, not the other way around. So strength training is a cheat code for life. I've met athletes that are strong enough and we focus on something else, but I've never had an athlete that, like there's one of my, Craig Rasmussen is one of my coaches. Our game is always how strong is strong enough. Well, there's no such thing as too strong. It's just a waste of training time for your goals. Like you're never like, wow, look at Bass, he's just too strong. He messed everything up. Like that's never the answer, right? That's never a problem. It just means that we would spend time doing something else, more endurance work or more mobility work. So it's how strong is strong enough. but I've never met anyone who had a disadvantage because they were so strong. So my answer is, I think if you see someone with cancer or something like that, there tend to be muscle wasting diseases. They become frail. Well, we have a tool to prevent frailness, right? And that's called strength training. Strength training is a cheat code for life.
I mean, 48 cancer survivor running 21 minutes for 5K, lifting 400 pounds for deadlift and 350 for squats or 300 for squats. And you don't, I understand. And then you do pull-ups with 50 pounds, 1 RM or 2 RM. It's quite an inspirational story. And the way you've transformed your business, you want to, I mean, your gym got the award 3 times in US, the best.
Yep. Twice with men's health and once with women's health, but they're the same company. So it's just 3 times awarded. Yeah.
And in one family, you have 2 superstars, Alwyn Cosgrove and Rachel Cosgrove. And it's quite an honor to have you in our show. And I think the 60 minutes just flew by, and so many nuggets, fitness nuggets, and your heart-filled, emotional experience sharing is just mind-blowing. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me, my friend. I appreciate it. Thank you to all my listeners in India.